Hello class, today we're going to take notes on A Vindication of the Rights of Woman by Mary Wollstonecraft. This is the next text that we're going to read, and it actually has a partner text that has to do with education in women, but we're going to do two different sets of notes and we'll read these two separately. Now, we're going to do this quick start a little bit differently than I normally would, but I want you to think about what opportunities there are for education today. So think about how educational opportunities have improved for women over the years. We've talked about this a few times throughout the semester, but I want you to think like perhaps in your home country. How has education different for different genders, and how has it changed or improved throughout the years? So just take a few moments. If you have somebody at home that you can discuss with, go ahead and discuss this with them. We're going to be reading an argument. Now, there are a few genre elements of argument. First of all, it expresses a position on an issue. It supports the position and reasons and evidence. With reasons and evidence, considers other points of view, anticipating and answering possible objections raised by opponents, and may be spoken or written. Now, you've read several arguments, but the two that we're getting ready to read in this unit are very legitimate, wanting to get the same point across. So you're going to want to pay attention to what pieces of evidence and what rationales are given in each of these texts to prove the thesis. And this is something that we're really going to be looking at. We're also going to be looking at counter-arguments, which we discussed in the previous text. When you evaluate arguments, it's important to keep in mind that many writers express their opinions on important issues by presenting a formal argument. Similar to a modest proposal, which looks like a formal argument, but formal arguments are meant to be a well thought out plan or course of action that a person thinks someone should take. For example, one might make the argument that, and then in fact people are making this argument right now, that Donald Trump should be impeached because his words incited violence on the events at the U.S. Capitol last week. People were making this argument. And so somebody writing an essay on that would then make their points, present evidence, etc. If you remember, we read the Declaration of Independence last year, which does the same thing. Now, when you read an argument, you should determine whether it is valid by evaluating the argument's main elements. Evaluate the main parts of the argument and see whether or not, this argument is worth believing. Can you get behind what the person is saying or no? Steps to identifying arguments. The first thing you need to do is identify the author's claim or their thesis, right? Another way to say that the main claim is the thesis. Is the opinion presented clearly and in detail? Do we know exactly what's being argued based on their thesis or their main claim? Once you've done that, you need to consider the reasons the author gives to support the claim. Are the reasons logical? Do they support the claim? If the reasons are logical and they do directly support the claim, you're more likely to believe the argument or to get behind what the person is saying. If they're not, or there's some issue with credibility, or they don't properly rationalize what they're saying, then we're less likely to follow. As you evaluate the author's reasons, watch out for fallacies or errors in logic. Common fallacies include oversimplification, hasty generalization, false cause and effect, or red herring. You may have heard of some of these. There are more fallacies than these, but these are some common ones. Oversimplification is treating a complex problem as if it's super simple. For example, you might say the decision to take the COVID vaccine is simple. Take the vaccine, you're safe. But in fact, it's more complicated than that because there are, multiple risks involved. People need to be informed about things, etc. Or in the example that I gave of Donald Trump in the impeachment, people are saying it's simple. His words, he gave a speech, people listened to his words, they became violent, therefore he caused the violence. While you could reason through that a little bit more, that is oversimplifying the situation, right? He needs to be impeached because of this thing. Well, there are more aspects to this. Hasty generalization means making a generalization that is too broad or too drawn from too little information. What do we mean by this? We mean, a really good example, and we've studied this in the past, assuming that an entire group or nation of people are terrorists based on what one or two people did. This is a hasty generalization. Or assuming that an entire group of people are stupid based on, you observed them do one thing, or you observed one person from America do one thing. False cause and effect is the mistaken assumption that because one event followed another, the first event caused the second one to occur. So let me say it again. The mistaken assumption that because one event followed another, the first event caused the second one to occur. So actually, the example I gave about Donald Trump relates to this one as well. And lastly, the red herring, irrelevant or false reasoning used to divert attention away from an issue. This is actually a fallacy that conspiracy theorists tend to rely on a lot. They think the government is presenting distractions to keep people from the real issues. The Jeffrey Epstein issue, for those of you familiar, would fall under this. Now, finally, you need to examine the author's evidence. Does the author give relevant facts and sufficient details to support his or her reasoning? Is the information verified by a reliable source? If the evidence is not there to support the claims, then there's literally no point identifying this argument, or no point believing this argument, because if you cannot provide sufficient evidence for what you're saying, then how do we know what you're saying is true? So just like I tell you guys, evidence, 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 evidence. You have to have evidence, and more importantly, you have to have warrants that explain your evidence and how they connect to the thesis. When you're analyzing somebody else's argument, it's your chance to critique what they're saying. If their evidence isn't good and you don't believe it, then it's not good. That's not an effective argument. So if you're evaluating the validity of an argument and something is not there, call them for it. It's not there. You didn't give evidence. Now, we talked a little bit about counter arguments, but in this text and the next, we're really going to look at analyzing counter arguments. Writers often include counterarguments in which they anticipate opposing views and refute them. A counterargument is where you literally anticipate what the opposing side will say, and before they ever say it, you're going to refute it, which means you're going to give a reason why they're wrong. So others argue, what others argue is the counterargument. Your response to that is the rebuttal. Means like if I am arguing with a sibling and a parent comes to intervene, right? And we're pleading our case to the parent. And my sister says, let's do this. I'm arguing with my sister that she says it's not fair. I'm allowed to go out past 10 o'clock at night, but when she was my age, she wasn't allowed to, right? Now, she's upset I'm getting to go out. So I know my argument is I should be allowed to stay out past 10 o'clock. The counter argument is that my sister, I know she's going to say, when she was my age, she wasn't able to. So when I'm arguing my case to my parents, I need to have this in my mind because I know that's what they're going to say, right? Well, when your sister was your age, blah, blah, blah. So I need to have a reason why I'm different than my sister. And I might say, yeah, Emily wasn't allowed, but she also broke curfew a lot and didn't listen, which is why she had such a strict curfew. I never break the rules. And, you know, I'm going out to do schoolwork, not to party or something like that, right? That would be my rebuttal for the counter argument of, well, your sister or none of your other siblings were allowed to stay out this late. In Mary Wollstonecraft's text, she provides several counter arguments that acknowledge her opponent's perspectives. She literally mentioned or referenced some people by name and alluded to others that would have been well known at the time. And this makes readers who might disagree with her more likely to be open to her ideas, because people that may have supported those other people arguing the opposite stance will now listen to what she's saying before they ever have the chance to respond to her paper, because this is written, and it was written and published as like a pamphlet. And they might be more willing to buy into this. We talked at the beginning of the year and last year, we talked about ethos and credibility and how acknowledging the holes in your own argument, or acknowledging, you know, hey, the other side has a valid point, can sometimes help you strengthen your own argument. And that's where counter arguments come into place. So if you know that, you know, there's a major weakness that everybody agrees with in your argument, and then you can find a way to refute that, that's great to include in your argument. Now, we have several vocab words for this unit, and I'm going to ask that you do the vocab activity like we've done in the past. So what you're going to do with each of these 8 words, you're going to define the word, and then you're going to use the word in your own sentence. Now, using the word in your own sentence means not copy and paste from the internet, but you're going to, based on the definition, use the word in a sentence. Make sure you underline the word that you've used in the sentence. So you should have a total of 8 definitions and 8 sentences of your own. Okay? So that's it for today. If you have any questions, please reach out to me and I'll be happy to help. See you guys tomorrow.